This is Antic, the Atari 8-Bit Podcast. I'm Kay Savitz. In my last interview, I talked with the creator of SIO to PC, which let Atari users use a DOS computer as its disk drive and printer. This interview is with the creator of a product which, 6 years earlier, let Atari users use a CP/M computer as its disk drive and printer and keyboard. Vince Cate owned a company called USS Enterprises, which had just one product, the Critical Connection. Critical Connection was a combination of a specialized cable and software for connecting an Atari 8-bit computer to a computer running CP/M. The long cable had an SIO plug on one end and a 25-pin serial port on the other, and some chips in the middle, allowing the Atari and CP/M box to communicate at 19,200 bits per second. The Critical Connection was released in 1983, 6 years before SIO to PC. They shared many similar features. With it, you could use an entire CP/M floppy disk as an emulated 600K Atari disk drive, create CP/M disk files which emulated Atari disks, and print from the Atari to the CP/M computer's printer. The CP/M machine even acted as a print spooler. You could also use the CP/M machine's keyboard to type on the Atari. Vince needed to create a file format to store virtual floppy disks on the CP/M machine. The file name extension was ATR. I don't know positively, but I'm pretty sure it's a different file format from the well-known ATR format that Nick Kennedy created for SIO to PC 6 years later. Just similar functionality, given similar names. Nick Kennedy told me he had never heard of the Critical Connection. Here's what Jerry Purnell wrote about Critical Connection in the September 1983 issue of Byte magazine. Vincent Cate continues to improve his Critical Connection. The gadget makes an Atari think a CP/M computer is a set of disks. The only requirement is that your CP/M system have an RS-232C serial port operating at 19,200 bits per second. Given that, you needn't buy disks for the Atari. By using the Critical Connection, you can make the Atari believe you have 4 disks. The really nice part is that you can use 8-inch as well as 5¼ inch disks. Cate's new software package has automatic installation for a number of CP/M systems, including K-Pro, North Star, Sanyo, CCS, Heath, Zenith, and Morrow. Cate's documentation is improved, but it's not what I'd call good. Still, you can puzzle it out, and if you don't want to invest a lot in an Atari system but still want to use disks with it, Cate's Critical Connection is the way to go. This interview took place on November 20th, 2024.
My father worked for IBM, and he had been in computers for quite some time, since before I was born, I guess, or about when I was born. And we had actually been going to the Homebrew Computer Club, the same one that Jobs and Wozniak were going to.
Wow.
In Palo Alto.
Mm-hmm.
And he got an SDK80 board from a friend at Intel. And so we had a computer that was running CP/M pretty early on. And then we had the Atari game machine for having fun. And then we found, I was interested in connecting them together. And my dad had a friend that worked at Atari and was able to get this big manual that explained all the protocols and stuff that the Atari talked to its disk drives and things at. And so I had the documentation necessary to play. So, and this is, I was, 15, 16, something. It's a long time ago.
Wow. So you created this product when you were that age?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
This
All
is,
right.
yeah, I was, I taught myself assembly language and was writing stuff, right? That was what was going on here.
All right. So you had the CP/M, a CP/M machine for some reason that your dad had, I assume?
My dad's computer.
Uh-huh. And then you had an Atari 800?
It was a 400 originally. I think we ended up getting an 800. I actually still have I don't remember if we had it. I have the 400 in the other room right there.
Nice. Okay, so how did this project come about? What made you want to connect them together?
So the Atari had very limited storage, and we just had the flat keyboard, so it wasn't fun to type on. And it's just, I had this nice computer right there. It'd be nice if I could use that keyboard, right? And the CPM machine had a serial port. It was RS-232, and the bus on the Atari was a TTL level serial port. So all I had to do was to get from the 5 volts to the plus and minus 12 volts, and I had a friend who could show me how to do that. And it was funny. This friend ended up going to Berkeley the same time I did, and then he ended up going to Intel and working on the CPUs that Intel was doing back then. I can't remember which one, 486, something like that. Yeah,
Nice.
Ed Grachowski. Yeah. So he told me that I just needed this chip and this chip, and we could get the different voltages. We just had one power source, but we needed to get plus 12 and minus 12 and 5 volts, right? And so there was some little chip that would charge up a capacitor and switch the capacitors around and add these together and make the voltages that you needed. And yeah.
So you're
And then there was
changing the CPM system's RS-232 level signals to the TTL level signals that the Atari
yeah,
needed.
and the other way too, right? The other way
Right,
was the hard.
right.
The other way is where you needed all the tricky stuff. So
Um, I said I read many reviews and articles about the critical connection, and one of them kind of complained that so you had this cable that had the SIO uh, uh, port jack on one side and the serial jack on the other side, and then in the middle was like kind of a box where you have your hardware, your chips and things, and they were just like, but it's covered in epoxy and we can't see what's going on in there. So.
So there wasn't I wasn't trying to hide it. It was just that if you covered it in epoxy, it would never get any shorts, or it was protected. And the epoxy conducts the heat out, and it keeps everything safe. And anyway, it was easy and it worked.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So did you build these things by hand?
Yes, I had a circuit board made.
Uh-huh.
So it was, it was a tiny little circuit board, right? It's just a couple of chips. Um, but yeah, I could get, I really should have, I had a box of things at home that I was meant to bring in. But I actually have, circuit boards and stuff. But yeah, just a little tiny, tiny circuit board. Um, and yeah, we were just, plugging in, soldering some stuff. It was not too much.
Hmm.
I think in the end we sold like 175 of them.
Really?
Yeah.
That's I don't know, maybe somehow lower than I might have guessed be-
Or,
because and then these were $175 each, right? I
oh
believe.
no, maybe that was the price. Okay, then
Yeah.
I can't remember how many was sold.
Yeah.
That I'm not sure.
Huh.
Um,
Well, you okay, yeah, it was $175.
okay,
Um
okay.
um hmm. But
Let me see.
yeah, I'd
No,
like to
no,
know.
it was close to 300 that we sold, I think.
300. Okay.
I think I remember like over 50,000 total, something like that. So something 300 up somewhere in there. Yeah. It was for a guy that's, 15, 16,
Yeah.
it was fun.
You made $50,000? Is that what you said?
Yeah, something like that.
Uh-huh. You hustled, you clearly hustled in making this product, like getting word out. I found write-ups in Byte magazine and Dr. Jobs journal and Analog and Antic and other places. Everybody, InfoWorld, did a big write-up.
Yeah.
You just sending out review units and letters, and how did that go?
Um, no, I didn't really send out review units. I don't know. I guess we may have, sent a few emails or something. I don't remember, but it was a weird thing, right? People are interested in something that's strange,
Yeah.
and and for some people, it made really helped. It made things easier, right? You
Who
had
do
all
you?
this the storage and
Mhm.
nice keyboard.
Right. So then you said one of the features was you could type on the CPM machine to, I guess if you were writing a program or something, you could type the basic program or whatever into the CPM machine and then save it as an Atari file. So you didn't have to use
No,
your
no, no.
fork. No?
I had it so that you could type, and as you typed, characters appeared on the Atari. Like I replaced the keyboard driver
Uh-huh.
so that there was some vector for all the drivers in software,
Hmm.
And so I replaced the driver for the keyboard to go to my own thing. And in my thing, it could take keyboard strokes from the CPM keyboard. So you could type and it with the CPM keyboard, and it would come up on the Atari screen.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wild.
Yes, it was kind of a wild thing.
All right. And there was also the you could the print spooler, right? Right. You could print from the
Yeah, you could.
Atari and it would spool to the CPM machine and then print out there.
Yep, yep,
And then you could use the CPM disk drives in a couple of different ways, it sounded like.
yep.
Either like take over a disk and have a big disk, or you could just have a 90K file, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So we made sort of a virtual disk. So it looked like an Atari disk drive with all the sectors, but it was really just in a file. But we also had it to where you could use the file names and it would, use the file names on the CPM system.
Hmm.
So it was an
Who
amazing
was,
piece of code for a 15-year-old kid.
yeah, absolutely. Who was the customer? Who was buying these 500 or 600 units?
Just random people like me that, where their family had both machines,
Yeah.
right? But it turned out there was like 300 of them or something. So it was, it was a niche market, but a big enough niche that it was fun.
Hmm. And you being a 15, 16-year-old kid, what'd you do with this money?
I don't know. I guess I got a car and, the kid doesn't need much money. I went to
Right.
college. I went to
Yeah.
college.
Okay, that's a good use of the money. So, I mean, did your parents didn't make you did they make you put it all in savings, or did you get to spend it as you wanted?
No, my parents were pretty much hands off. What I wanted to do, I could do. That was, yeah. But yeah, it's true. I don't even know what all it went into thinking about it. But
Huh.
yeah.
So you wrote the software for this as well.
Yes, yes. That was the hard part. This the
Okay.
software,
So that was
right?
on the CPM machine, and it was um, it written in what language, and how was it
It
hard?
was
Tell me all about it.
there was, you know, it was either Z80 or 8080 assembler and 6502 assembler. It was all assembly code. Um, and like some of the fun parts, okay. So the Atari has an extra line besides just the serial line to tell it when it's doing a command. And I didn't have that on the RS-232, right? So I had to figure out when a command started. Now, a command had a certain checksum on it, and it was a certain length, like, I don't remember, 10 bytes or, whatever, some length that it was, right? And then there were data packets, which I think were 128 bytes long, and they had a checksum. And so I had to sort of figure out where I had sort of a rolling window where I was, recalculating the exclusive OR to see where a checksum would work. And when the checksum worked, I could tell that was the beginning of, a data packet or a command packet, right? And so this sort of thing to figure out where the packets started when I didn't have the extra wire to say this is the start of a packet. So,
Hmm.
you know,
Um, okay, so the question that brought me here in the first place was the virtual disks, um, the 90K virtual disks. Apparently, the file extension that you came up with was .atr,
yes, for Atari, of
for
course.
Atari, of
Yeah.
course. So tell me about creating this ATR file format, and um, how did you do that? And tell me the story.
I don't know how much there's to tell. There was, um, again, I had this big black book, it's very thick, 2, 3 inches thick, which documented all of the details of the Atari, right? It was all the hardware, all the software, everything for the Atari. And so I sort of from that knew what the format, what bytes they needed to specify the disk and where the data sectors were and all that, whatever. And so I just was making the file on the CPM system to match what was necessary for that setup. So people have kept using this particular format, I
Well,
guess.
see, 6 years later, a guy named Nick came up with SIO to PC, which was basically the same idea, but connecting to a DOS machine instead of CPM.
Uh-huh.
And he had the ATR file format for virtual disks. And I'm trying to figure out if he doesn't, and he says today that he never heard of the critical connection. And so I'm trying to figure out if he developed his idea independently, which is perfectly reasonable because I mean ATR is the obvious file name
Yes.
extension. Um, uh, or or did he know about your thing and borrow your anyway? But I don't have there's plenty of .atr files from SIO to PC out in the world. It became the default standard. All the emulators use it. Um, but I don't have any of your ATR files to compare and go, hey, are these similar enough? Anyway, so that's kind of the question that brought me to you in the first
Well,
place. Is just like,
the format that I was using was the format that they wrote on the discs, right? So I don't. It's possible that format was sort of specified for Atari discs,
mhm,
right?
right.
And
Sure. I
not,
mean, it makes sense. Just put the bytes down in order or whatever
yeah.
made sense. Sure. Yeah. I mean, interesting. But yes, someone else developed a similar product that used a similar file name and you know, years later. And I mean, it's a great idea. Of course, someone's gonna do that. So, and today there's a newer product called SIO to USB, which lets you connect your Mac or whatever to Atari. So the idea that you came up with, in 1983 was a good idea and continues in the modern age. So, um, so did you ever get any feedback from users, any problems, any, I don't know, complaints or feature requests or anything that you remember?
I don't remember anything particular.
I know that you had two versions of the product. One was the original for the 400, 800, and then you came up with a new version, Critical Connection XL, which was for the XL computers. I'm curious to know what the differences might have been because I didn't think any differences would be needed.
I don't remember. It could be the operating system, the
Mm,
drivers. Again, there was a table where you had to replace the drivers for the keyboard or the printer or the disk or whatever. And it
sure,
could be just that was at a different location in a later version of the Atari operating system
sure. Oh, that makes sense. So
or
there
something.
was, in addition to the CPM software, there was also some sort of driver that you had to install on the Atari.
Yeah, it would boot up from the CPM system through the thing, right?
Oh, right, right, right.
Booting
Okay.
off a disk.
Yeah.
But I had to write code in 6502 assembler for all the stuff that was going to run on the Atari. And again, I can't remember if it was 8080 or Z80 assembler on the CPM side. But yeah, lots of assembly code. Somewhere I had a big printout.
Wow.
Um,
Well, if you find that, I'd love to scan it. If you find
yeah.
any of the discs, those haven't been archived. Would love to scan them. Even if they're on 8-inch discs, we can do it. It's not a big deal.
What are the odds that you could still read it after all this time?
Um, Not bad. The odds are not bad, depending on how they were stored, depending on whatever. If they were in a attic that got hot and then cold, not if they were in very dusty or moldy area, not. But if they were stored reasonably, they're probably fine. Um,
Wow.
yeah,
I will have to try. Yeah.
yeah. And oddly, if they're stored on 8-inch discs, the data is so what's not dense. Just the bytes are so big. They're always easy to read. They're just like never any problem. Just the
Okay.
as disks got smaller and bits got compressed closer together, it can get more complicated. So um, yeah. Anyway, if you find it, we can do it. Um, let's see. People complain. Everybody complained about your manual, sir.
Yes, I was a programmer, not a documentation guy. And by the time they saw the manual, they'd already paid. So,
Right. Um,
Huh.
this is fascinating that a teenager just like came up with a product. I mean, of course, came up with the product and managed to sell it. And you had ads. I saw ads, classified ads and little ads in various uh
Yeah.
things. And fine, you did that. But then like I just love that everybody treated it like this is a thing. This is a company and they have a product. And nobody knew or cared, I don't know, that it was some, punk ass kid. You know?
Yeah. There's my mom tells the story, and somebody calls up and they says, can I speak to your head of, marketing? Can I talk to Vince Cate? She's like, can I talk to your senior developers or so, and then she's going, if you want to talk to anybody, you have to talk to me. There's nobody else.
It's hilarious. Did you have any other products or think about doing any other products?
No, after that, I was, going to college, and so I didn't really do anything with it. And it's felt like, the PC came out and CPM sort of faded away, and Atari, I don't know, there was other hotness that came out, and it was
Um,
just like a particular point in time where, the Atari was good and CPM was good, and then, other people sort of moved on to PC and DOS, and
right. And did you as well move on to PC and DOS when you went to college?
I actually had a CPM system probably through college.
One of the articles said there was an experimental command. This command will allow users of certain CPM systems to actually read disks made from the Atari on the CPM machine, eliminating the need to have an Atari drive at any time. As I said, capability is experimental. You remember that?
This is not even true. You could not take my our system had an 8-inch, our CPM system had an 8-inch drive, right?
Right.
And the Atari was 5-inch, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we couldn't take the physical disk and put it in the CPM system. That didn't.
Okay. That's true.
We could
That's
copy
true.
an image. We could make an image from you could take an Atari disk and put it in and copy that into a file, which was a complete image of the disk on the CPM system. And you could then boot from that image. But it's, a virtual disk, I think I called it. It wasn't, no, you couldn't take not in our house. We couldn't take the
I
Atari drive and put it in the CPM machine.
mean, but
It
there
never
were
happened.
other CPM machines that had 5.25 inch discs.
That might be, but I never did
Not in your house. Oh yeah. Right.
it.
Okay. What other things did you do with your Atari? What other Atari stories or memories do you have that you might want to share?
Oh, there was some silliness, like there was some game where you had to explore sort of it wasn't Dungeons and Dragons, but it was that kind of a thing, right? You had to go this way and that way and do something. And I actually made it to where the CPM system would play. If I got killed, I could have the CPM system play back to that point, right?
Nice. They were like, remember what keyboard commands you did and
Yeah,
play
you
them
do
back?
this and this and this to get to here. It's like it start all over, and I could get it back to that.
That's, I love it. Nice. Um, all right. So tell me about what you do today. What do you do these days?
So I moved to Anguilla in 1994, and I was the first person that wanted to register a domain name here. I wanted to register offshore.ai. And so I emailed John Postal, who was back then the god of the internet. And he said, there's nobody managing .ai. Do you want to manage .ai? And I said, okay. And so I've been running a top level domain for the last 30 years, and all people are using it for artificial intelligence. And so it's getting close to a half the government's budget here in Anguilla.
And it all passes through you, pretty
Yeah.
much. Wow.
They're giving it to somebody else in January, Identity Digital. But up till now, it's all been through me.
Wow.
So
My
it's been
assumption would be that until we'll say the AI boom that started a couple of years ago, there wasn't a lot of interest in .ai domains, and then all of a sudden,
Well, the way I would say it is it's a viral marketing thing. The more AI names that are out there, the more people see it. And so the more people think of registering it. And we were up to about $1 million a month before ChatGPT came out. And then between November 2 years ago and the following April, it went up to about 4 million a month. So
oh,
it doubled a couple more times.
mhm.
But if you look at it, when we started selling to the whole world, it was about 15 years ago, and it was like $2,500 a month. So we've sort of doubled 11 times in the last 15 years, which it's almost normal. I mean, it's the doubling has been going on for a long time, and the doubling from ChatGPT is nice, but it's not that out of the ordinary for this domain, right? So
Interesting. So what are you going to do once you're not in charge of it anymore?
um, I may end up making seasteads, or I may make drones to look for illegal fishing. Or I might just go travel. I'm not sure. I'm not sure yet. But we've got a couple of projects. I have seastead.ai and skysentinel.ai,
I'm sorry,
which are
I don't know what a seastead is.
a seastead is a structure on the ocean designed for living in, as opposed to moving. The goal is to have a comfortable place to live on the ocean, not necessarily to move quickly through the water, right? So it's not like a boat. The goal
Is
is not the same as a boat.
is it a houseboat?
But it's out in the ocean. Not houseboats are all on flat water like lakes or rivers, right?
Okay,
It's like a houseboat for the open ocean. And so
interesting.
it's a question, it's an engineering challenge of how do you make something which is lower cost but very comfortable. Well, if you're moving slow, it's hard to be comfortable because the waves really knock you around, right? And so designing for stability becomes extra important. And so it's an interesting sort of engineering problem, which I think there are solutions to, and therefore it'd be fun to work on. And I've actually been making models for a long time, like 20 years or something. I've been trying out different ideas in scale, and you can test the ideas pretty well in a scale model. My YouTube channel has dozens and dozens of videos showing different seastead models that I've tested through the years.
The name of your company was USS Enterprises. Was that a Star Trek reference?
It was either Star Trek, yeah, it's a Star Trek reference. Um, but and then Star Trek, of course, is from the USS Enterprise, the aircraft carrier.
Right.
So sort of indirectly that too. But
Hmm. There was another Atari CPM product, at least one other. The one I'm familiar with is called what's called the ATR 8000. Were you familiar with that?
I don't remember.
Okay. It was basically a CPM computer that you attached to the Atari, but it was a whole separate processor and everything. It was not a cable like your thing.
I might have, now that you mention it, I think may have seen that, but it to me is um, the nice thing about mine is that the hardware wasn't that much, right?
I guess you provided a long cable because the Atari might not be right next to this CPM computer. Um, somebody in the reviews like said the cable was ridiculously long at 30 feet. And another review said it was a 50-foot cable, which just sounded absolutely silly. And so I don't know. I think I would have appreciated not having to have the machines side by side on a desk, but was
I don't know.
any thoughts on the cable length for this for your product?
I had a tester and I could test that the cable worked up to much beyond the speed that we needed it, right? So we were running, I think it was 19,200 baud,
Yeah.
and I would test the cable up to like 100,000. I would test my circuitry and the cable up to 100,000 baud. And so as long as, I could make a cable, whatever, and as long as it still worked at that speed, it was okay at the 19,200. Yes, it may be longer than some people needed, but the cable, the wire didn't cost that much back then.
If you could send a message to the people who are still playing with their Atari computers today, and you can right now, what would you tell them?
Lovely computer. I had a lot of fun with it. It was, it made, I mean, the graphics were amazing at that time. Um, so it's a good way to start in computers.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Okay.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute something, please consider supporting my Patreon at patreon.com/Savitz. I've been publishing interviews like these since 2013 and would like to continue doing so for a long time, and your financial support will help. Thanks.